This episode is proudly sponsored by HASA, the trusted choice for liquid chlorine. It's better because it offers the highest purity, works instantly, and contains no added CYA. By the bottom feeder, professional-grade battery-powered swimming pool vacuum system, it sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off the bottom feeder with code DVB100. Skimmer, trusted by over 30,000 pool service professionals across North America. Skimmer software helps you save time, grow revenue, and boost your 5-star reviews. Whether you're just starting out or expanding your team, Skimmer's easy-to-use tools and expert support have you covered. Upgrade your business in 2025 with Skimmer. Try Skimmer for 30 days for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk about 2024 and 2025, the pool season, kind of merging both of them. There hasn't been a huge change from one year to another since the COVID-19 pandemic, when things really flipped kind of crazy in the industry. But I'll touch on some trends from last year and some things that may be trending in 2025. Join my coaching program and take your pool service to the next level. Connect with other pool pros in your area, gain valuable knowledge, and transform your business with personalized one-on-one advice from me. With over 36 years of experience, I'm here to help you succeed like never before. Learn more at poolguycoaching.com. As you know, the pool industry is a pretty static industry. What I mean by that is there's not a lot of big changes that happen in the pool industry. There's nothing like another major manufacturer coming in. For instance, you have Penter, Hayward, and Jandy, or Floridra, I should say. They've been the stalwarts of the industry for a long time. They're smaller companies that try to break in. I think the latest push is Aquastar with their pipeline filter and pump, and the Raypack heater, and then you have the Poolside Tech, the attendant. Basically, they're trying to make that as another branded kind of company. So it's called the New Three. So I think they're trying to cut into the big three business with their kind of setup using those three different companies and kind of merging their equipment for your pad there. But that just again goes to show you how static the industry is. There's your typical companies that make products. There are robotic pool companies trying to break in. BWT is trying to break into the US market. They're mainly in Europe, and so they're coming out with new models here. It's hard to break in because you have Dolphin and Polaris that dominate the market now. After Aquabot was absorbed and broken apart, you have just basically Dolphin and Polaris making the US branded robotic pool cleaners. And then you have a lot of companies from overseas making cleaners, IPR, and then there's a bunch of other Beatbot, bunch of other companies that are making these cordless cleaners. One way you can kind of predict the future of the industry is to look at what's happening now or in the past. And if you look at the 2024 stock prices of some of the companies that are listed on the market. Now, Heritage Pool Supplies was purchased by Home Depot for $18.25 billion. They don't really have anything on the market that you can kind of see what they're earning. But I'm assuming that their profit has gone up since the acquisition. They do have a lot of locations. Home Depot shares are up like 10% this year. So I would imagine Heritage is doing pretty good. There's no way to actually get a glimpse into it because they're not listed on the market. But Pool Corp is listed on the stock exchange, and they were down about 10% year to date, 9.92%. And then Leslie's is also a public traded company now, and they were down 68% this year as far as their value year to date. And then Poolworks is a privately held, they're held by a private equity firm, so they're not traded openly on the market. So there's no really way to know exactly how good they did this year. But sales are down, I think, across the board because there is a kind of a slowdown in the pool building. According to Pool Corp, this is something they put out in June. that pool construction will decrease in 2024 by 15 to 20%. And you can kind of feel that out there because there's a lot of factors causing the slowdown in pool building growth. Number one, the real estate market is pretty stagnated, which means that people aren't selling their homes and buying new homes. New construction, of course, in California, if you're buying a new house, if you get more than a 3-foot backyard, you're doing well for yourself. So in other words, the new homes being built, at least in California, they don't really have a backyard. They're called detached condos now because they basically have no yard. So that's going to really impact, I really think that's going to impact the future of pool building in California. No one's really talking about it, but I would say that in the future in California, the only pools that are going to be built are going to be these gigantic apartment complexes. It's pretty crazy here. What's being built, the only thing being built in my area, in my surrounding area, are these 4-story apartment buildings. They're maybe like 150, 200 units. There's some that are like 1,000 units. So I would say they're going to, of course, have a pool and spa. Although the one that was built right around the corner from my house, I think it's like 200 units. There's only a pool and no spa, which I'm kind of scratching my head thinking, why did they do that? I'm not sure. And I actually went to also a new townhome complex not too far from where I live. And they also built a pool with no spa, which is kind of weird as well. But we'll see how that goes with that kind of trend in the future. So I don't think backyard pools in my area are going to be something that's going to increase because there's no backyards. That's kind of just the way it is. I think other states wouldn't be affected as much. Arizona, Texas, and Florida, I'm sure they're still building houses with backyards, but in California, you're very limited. So I think a lot of the new construction will be backyards that have grass or need a remodel. And you're not going to see a lot of brand new builds and new home constructions, at least in my general area of Southern California. And I would imagine this trend is statewide because land is so expensive and it's finite and there's no need to build a house with, a big lot. My particular house I bought back in 2003 and it's got a 6,500 square foot lot. Not bad, but they are not building any homes with anything more than like a 5 by 10 backyard area. It's going to affect things, definitely. Another thing that affects pool building is how you can borrow the money to put the pool into the backyard. Most people don't pay for their pool with cash, and so there are some finance companies that will fund the pool project. A lot of people were using their home equity line, but as of like prior to 2 or 3 years ago when it was 4%, you're looking at 9 or 10% for the home equity line of credit, which is something that people don't want to use because 4% you can buy a boat, buy an RV, get a pool built. It's really not painful to pay that, but if you're paying 9 or 10%, it becomes very painful. For example, back in 2021, if you wanted to have a pool built, let's say you wanted to build a pool for $150,000, you can borrow that money against your house at 4%, which would be $6,000 a year or $500 a month. That's pretty good for $150,000. But if you have that same amount of money and you're paying today's rate, which I think is around 9.5%, so 9.5%, that's $14,250, and that's $1,187 a month. So that $150,000 pool project that was costing you $500 a month is now going to cost you $1,187 a month to pay off that $150,000. And that's why pool building has slowed down significantly, because it costs a lot of money to build a pool, and now it costs a lot of money to borrow the money to build a pool. You're going to see the slowdown continue next year because rates aren't expected to go down at all. And I would suspect that 15 or 20% slowdown to continue into 2025. I don't see any way people can afford to build a pool where it's cost effective, and they're going to wait it out. They're going to wait out to 2026 now or 2027, or they may scrap the whole project. I know many people personally that were going to have a pool built last year and they scrapped the project because it just wasn't feasible or economical. And you'll find a lot of pool builder contracts being canceled for that reason. How does that affect the pool industry going forward? Well, there'll be less pools built, but there was a huge boom in construction during COVID, the COVID years. So I think that's going to kind of even the playing field. So I wouldn't worry about having less pools built. I think it's getting back to a normal amount of pools being built versus the COVID years where there was a huge explosion where people were waiting a long time. There was a pool company here, Blue Haven Pools, during COVID where my installer was saying that they have 150 equipment pads waiting for the equipment. They ran out of equipment. If you remember back then, you couldn't find anything because they were being bought up by everybody. And they had all these pools that were ready to have their pads put in, but there was no equipment for it. It was pretty crazy. Now, of course, there's plenty of inventory of everything out there. I don't think there's going to be a shortage per se. There was another factory fire from Biolab, but that was not anything critical to infrastructure. That was only specialty chemicals that burned in that fire. So it wasn't like they lost all the trichlor again. So that's not going to affect the market. If you look at inflation this year, 2024, I would say that it's going to be very similar to in 2025. I haven't seen the tablet prices dropping dramatically, nor other prices. You're going to probably have a slight increase in everything, like always, because costs will go up. I guess the only thing that's on the horizon that could impact the industry are any kind of tariffs against, foreign countries that are put in place by the government. You may not think it's going to affect you, but it will affect you because a lot of the raw materials come from overseas and come from other countries. So if there are tariffs on China, Mexico, or Canada, some of the raw materials used in the pool industry will be affected by that and expect to pay a higher price because of that. I mean, it does make some sense to protect U.S. companies, but also U.S. companies are heavily reliant on foreign products. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword when you talk about tariffs. But the consumers always pay the difference in that and pay the increase in prices. So I think in the pool industry, you're going to see some creep up in prices because a lot of products are made overseas. A lot of raw materials come from overseas, and that will definitely affect the pool industry. You probably should be raising your service rates every year to offset this. And it's something that the customers or consumers are realizing is that, if you would have bought a VS pump 4 years ago, you would have got a lot less than you're getting it right now. Same with a filter, a heater, things of that nature have gone up with the, huge inflation jump in 2020, 2021, when the industry was affected by massive inflation. And people are always saying, well, why don't the tablet prices get back down to the 2019, 2020 level where you can get a bucket of tablets retail for $99, 50-pound bucket of trichlor tablets for like $99 everywhere. You went even less in some places, and the wholesale price was even lower than that. You can buy them for $85 for a 50-pound bucket. Really, anywhere you went, any supplier you went to had that price for the Pool Pro. So I guess the question is, why are the prices still inflated if things are kind of back to normal? There's not a huge supply-demand shortage. The reason is everything else went up the last 2 or 3 years. The cost of fuel in California is going to even jump higher because we're going to have a new gas tax. It's going to raise the price, I think, by like $1.50 a gallon, which would be pretty insane because we're paying right now about $4.50 a gallon. So that means that the gas will be like $6 a gallon. So things like that, of course, affect the cost of goods. The cost of labor has gone up. Everyone's paying more employment taxes and labor, of course, with the minimum wage going up in California. And the reason why I'm talking so much about California is my home state. It's pretty crazy how expensive everything is and how good our wages are compared to other states. For example, the minimum wage for fast food workers is like $18. When I had my first job, and this is something that people always find interesting, how could we survive back then making what we made? But things were, of course, a lot less expensive. But I remember my first job, I was getting paid $3.25 an hour, and my first paycheck ever was $150. And $150 back then, in 1988, 87, 88, I thought I was rich. I had a work permit at 15 and a half, and I got a job. The company that I work for is probably no longer in business. It was called Best Products. If you remember this thing, it was this weird store where you would walk to the store, look at the prices of items, and then there was a conveyor belt at the bottom in the basement, and then you would pick up your item in this waiting area. So the employees would like put the item on a conveyor belt, and then you would get it, like a warehouse type store. So it was called Best Products, and that of course went out of business along with Federated and Zodi's and all those old school Fedco, all those Gemco, all those old school businesses that you may remember. And $3.25 an hour, I thought it was a lot of money, and $150 can buy you a ton of stuff back then. But of course, inflation is inflation, and things are a lot more expensive. The wages go up, the price of everything goes up. It's really unaffordable to go to places like Chick-fil-A now, or even Cane's, because the price of the food has skyrocketed. In-N-Out Burger still fairly affordable, but everyone else has gone up to a point where you can't go out as often as you used to. Of course, that'll affect the food industry, but it also will affect everything, because everything kind of trickles over and affects the state or the country as a whole. So if inflation continues to go up at that rate, that means that the cost of chemicals will go up, the cost of labor will go up, and the cost of everything will continue to rise, which means that your rates that you charge should be going up at the same rate as the inflation, which is around 3 or 4% every year, and you should be raising your rates to compensate or to stay current at that point. One thing everyone always asks is, what do you think is going to be new in 2025, new products? Well, it's really slow in the industry to get a new product to market. It's not something that happens overnight. There are going to be probably some bigger, longer battery life cordless robotic pool cleaners. I can guarantee you that the technology has definitely improved. There's an Australian cordless cleaner I reviewed, the Matimac GT Freedom i45, and this one had a 4.5 hour runtime. They even have a larger one, I think it's the i60, that has like a 7 or 8 hour runtime. And this is something like the holy grail of cordless cleaners, because people that had bigger pools, anything bigger than 15,000 gallons, really couldn't use the cordless cleaners because they don't have a long enough runtime to clean an entire pool larger than 15,000 gallons. Dolphin Liberty had like a 2.5 hour runtime or 2 hour runtime, and the Polaris Freedom had a 2.5 or 3 hour runtime. And so having a 4.5 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour runtime is going to change the landscape of these cordless robotic pool cleaners. One of the things that stops you from getting a longer battery life is the weight of the cleaner. I mean, you can get a cordless robotic pool cleaner to run for 20 hours a day. I don't see a problem with that. But then you'd have to have 3 people help you lift it out of the pool because it would be so heavy. You would have a gigantic lithium-ion battery in there. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. But as these lithium-ion batteries get better with their technology, which means they can keep the same size battery or even make a smaller one but get a longer runtime, you're going to see the cordless robotic pool cleaners come out that are bigger, more powerful. One of the factors with the cordless robotic pool cleaners versus a corded one is the power of these cleaners. If you're running off a lithium-ion battery, can it generate the same suction power as something that's plugged in? They can. It just uses up the battery faster in some respects if they're going to increase the power of the cleaner. So that's one thing that they've worked on, and I think a lot of the technology is there in place. So you're going to see this year, I'm predicting not larger, but cordless robotic pool cleaners that last longer. They may actually be larger. They may be the bigger models that have the batteries now, like the Polaris Alpha. That'd be great to see that one as a cordless cleaner. You're going to see a lot of tweaking of current products. I'm sure you're going to see new things from manufacturers or updates on their products. But it's really hard to bring a product from the drawing board all the way through to market. I'm always asked, why can't you make a new chemical for the pool industry? Why is there just, liquid chlorine, trichlor tablets, dichlor, and calhypo? Why hasn't there been something that's emerged to take the place of that? Like, why can't you make a trichlor tablet without cyanuric acid? You kind of know that if you're in industry, that's kind of the nature of the tablet. Trichlorocyanuric acid, it's like in the chemical of the tablet. So why hasn't anyone brought a new chemical to market? It's really expensive to do that, and it's really hard to get into that market, and it's just not really worth it for anyone to invent a new chemical and bring it to the market. The only new one last year that I can remember was the SwimCheck fixed phosphate. It's a phosphate that's in a tablet form that you put into Skimmer. I found it to be highly effective. It's not really a new product because I think there was one in Canada that was already out that had this kind of thing, but there is some kind of something that bonds, or there is a filler, that keeps that phosphate remover in the hard tablet form, and it slowly dissolves in the skimmer. And it's not a new product again because I saw that already somewhere in Canada. Someone had that. So I would say that that's one of the latest products out there. But as far as anything new in the chemical industry, it's just hard to break in. And it's hard to get your product recognized by a wholesaler or a distributor because they already have, like Pool Corp, for example, has 80,000 SKUs. To get your product in Pool Corp would be very difficult because then they have to bring in a product that competes against a current SKU they have or current product they have. It makes no sense business-wise for a distributor to bring in another product that's going to take sales away from their existing products that are selling really well. And that's one reason why a new product is hard to break into the market, because those that are established, the big three, Jandy, Pentair, and Hayward, they already have long-term contracts with distributors. They're big sellers for distributors. So why would they carry a product that's going to compete with something that's selling already and entering into the computer and bringing it online and getting it stocked there? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why you don't see a lot of new products in the industry. It's a very static industry because it's a very successful industry because how static it is. There's not a lot of change in the equipment. Manufacturers don't change the design of their product very often, and it's something that is very normal in the industry. That's why when there ever is a new product that kind of breaks in, people are like ecstatic over it. It goes to all the pool shows as like the newest product of 2025. It'll get all these awards because it made it into the industry. It's something that is tough and it's something that's normal. And it's actually a good thing that the pool industry is so stable and static, in my opinion. It's great that you can go to the supplier and get the same thing every year without worrying about it being discontinued. If you're in another industry, if you're like an electronics industry and you cameras or something like that, you know that every couple of years that model is discontinued and they even stop making parts for it, and it just makes things difficult. Whereas in the pool industry, you have part books that go back 40 or 50 years. You can still get parts for things that have been installed 30 years ago. So I think that's a great thing about the industry, that it is very static, very stable, and it's not something you have to worry about buying something. If you buy a Pentair pump, you're going to have parts for that for the next 30 years. And that's reassuring. And I think the industry really is sustainable that way. And that's why it's set up that way. And that's why new things don't really break in. So as far as new products, probably not too many, maybe the same amount as last year. As far as new pool builds, probably the same amount as last year, maybe less or right around there. But it's getting back to the normal level of pool builds. And the existing pools will sustain the industry. So there's no real concern about a slowdown in building affecting the industry, I think, in the next 5 years or so. Maybe over the course of 10 or 15 years, you'll see an effect on the industry with less pool builds. But currently, I don't think it's going to affect anything in 2025 or 2006 going forward in the next few years. Prices were going to, of course, increase with the rate of inflation. So there's nothing new with that. And prices will not drop because of other factors. And that's kind of my prediction, or the kind of way things are going to be in 2025 coming out of 2024. Looking for other podcasts I've recorded, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. Click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu of close to 1,600 podcasts there for you. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.